This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. So today, as usual, we will start with a brief description of what is energy healing, followed by moments of silence, a little 3 minutes of silence, followed by the prayer of gratitude, followed by a review of yesterday's session, and then diving into today's session. So I know that seems like a lot before we get to today's sessions, but it helps to catch people up and to also look at the points that we covered yesterday from like a slightly different angles, right? So there's actually a value in that. Energy healing is the practice of using consciousness to influence matter. That's why the topic of today's webinar is particularly pertinent, because we're really talking about manifestation from consciousness. So, and the reason this is a thing, the reason this is a possibility, is because the source of creation, divine being, is awareness. It is consciousness. And so when we direct our conscious awareness in an intentional manner, changes occur. It actually causes transformation in the material field. So it's a non-invasive way to address imbalances in the system and to locate the seed core of imbalances, because the Western medicine always does its best to get down to what's the reason behind the imbalance, like maybe the arteries are blocked, so okay, that's what's causing the heart to fail or something like that. So it's trying to get down to the reason behind it. But what I found in energy healing is the reason so many times Western medicine fails a bit is, and not that it always does, Western medicine's great for a lot of things, and I have a lot of respect for doctors because they've been through training that I haven't been through. But sometimes the actual seed of an imbalance or an illness does not lie in the physical symptom or any physical symptoms. It lies at a deeper level of consciousness, mental, emotional, deeper like that. Sometimes even deeper levels, even deeper than emotions. So the thing about using consciousness to heal is that consciousness has this fabulous capability of fathoming the depths of the field of its own nature. It can self-refer. It looks into itself and it sees, if I take that symptom and I look what's underneath the symptom, what kind of feelings are in there? What kind of feelings are embedded in the body? And what's deeper than that and deeper than that? We find we eventually get back to the seed core of whatever it is that causes that imbalance. And then, because consciousness influences or affects whatever it touches, then consciousness can go efficiently to the root or the core, the seed of the imbalance, and promote the transformation at that level. And when that happens, changes occur in the physical level of creation. So today's topic is about manifestation. We're not just talking about healing the body specifically, but also how does consciousness do that in the field of the whole creation around us? It's a very interesting topic. Okay, I'm glad you're here. Let's do this. So anyway, that's the description of what is energy healing. And as we're going along, if more details need to be added in, I shall add them in to the best of my ability. Please feel free to ask about my question and answer box right up there. I love to be in touch with you guys. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is a little 3-minute of silence that we do at the beginning of these sessions. And the reason we do that is because awareness, consciousness, has its source, infinite, eternal, unbounded, and manifest, home of all the laws of nature, home of all the potential of all this creation, the source of the creation, resource. And so we start by like infusing our own field of awareness with the resources that it needs to be to function optimally. We optimize our awareness by going to the source of creation, to the source of awareness. So get comfy. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. We'll close our eyes for about 3 minutes. And it's always really beautiful to do this in a group, because when we do this silent thing in a group, it is actually more powerful for everyone, which is way cool. There's a value in doing it as a group. We'll close our eyes, and after about 3 minutes, I will ask you to open the eyes, and please take a minute to slowly open the eyes, because we want to integrate as much of that source material, that the resource of divine being, into our waking experience of awareness as possible. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's take a minute and then open the eyes. The more slowly we come out, the more opportunity we have for the nervous system to integrate the experience of divine being, pure source, material. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us, for being our ancestors and all amazing fullness that we've inherited from them. Thank you for being the eternal tradition of wisdom that connects that unmanifest with the manifest field of creation. Thank you for our ability to work concisely and efficiently today, that we may cover this topic fully. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you today, tonight. Nighttime for some people, daytime for others. I really hope that today's webinar meets and exceeds everybody's hopes for what we can accomplish together, because there's a lot of good that can come out of today's topic and a lot of good healings. And as I promised last night, I would focus more on people's questions today, because we covered a lot of territory yesterday, did a bunch of healings. And so this is now the review. We're at the review part of yesterday's session. The source of creation is a field of absolute and complete fulfillment. And that the impulse of life that sort of emerges from the source of creation, it rises in ever increasing waves of intensity of desire. So desire, it's that complete, total, utter fulfillment sprouts into the manifest field. And there's a gap right there, which is part of this great question. There's a gap right there between the unmanifest silence of being and then the beginning sproutings and the beginning of the manifestation process. And as I mentioned in previous webinars, we've really gone into deep detail. If you haven't been with me for previous, check out my knowledge base on subtle bodies, causal body, astral body, like that. You'll see more elaborated information about these very first sproutings of in the intelligence, the creative intelligence of being as it comes into the manifest field. And then, but the desire is like delicate at that point. And then it becomes more and more and more. And as it rises up and becomes very close to the expression, to its expression in the material world, that quality of desire gains momentum and it becomes more intense. And then it emerges into the material world. So today we're talking about the etheric body, which sits more at the upper end of that spectrum, that if the physical body, and there was a review yesterday of these layers, how we kind of can subdivide this spectrum from unmanifest being to physical material can be subdivided, and that there's the physical material obvious to all of us through our senses of perception, the physical material level of creation, then just one notch underneath that is the etheric level of the physiology. So the etheric level of the physiology sits at another gap, and that's the gap between the desire being an intention or a wish or a hope or a, it's there, it exists, the idea of it exists, an idea, but it has not yet fully come into being. And then there's this point where it changes and it comes into being. And there's kind of a gap right there. I mean, we can, albeit perhaps one of the things that this material world does is it kind of slows down that gap. Like, for instance, a soul might think, oh, I need to go to Earth. I need to live a life on Earth that's great, where I leave a legacy to mankind and my name goes down in history and, something like that. Like I have this destiny, it's my karma, I'm going to go to Earth, I'm going to do this thing. But, first they start out as a little sprout in mommy's belly, and then they have to go through childhood, and then they have to be a teenager, and, so it's like eventually they get to that desire, but it's sort of, they get a chance to kind of watch it manifest slowly, gradually. But along the way, there are lots of little desires, and there are a lot of little steps. If a person's going to live a life where they make a significant difference in this world, then they have to make decisions even when they're little. They're decisions along that way. to do something or to not do, or to study certain knowledge or not to study, and so forth. I had this vision this morning. Oh, there were two things I want to say. First of all, I want to say that the brilliance of this concept, that fulfillment lies in the state of being, of pure divine being, and then it rises in waves of desire, and then it manifests at the surface of life as an expression. That's not my concept. That concept comes from Maharishi. That's where I got it anyway. And he was an incredible innovator in the field of spiritual development. Incredible. More things he innovated than can be counted. So, but just in case anybody was wondering about that, that's not Dorothy. That I borrowed. And then on another, because that's, sweethearts. Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that. There was another one here. Let's see if I can find it. Which was, I made a mistake yesterday. I mentioned one of the healings yesterday involved this causal form. And when I say causal form, I'm talking about that deepest level of the physiology, most abstract level. And I mentioned that there's this resonant chamber in the causal body that allows for the evolution or the experience, the development of deepest nourishment, deep nourishment. And that we were using that as we were doing healings for various things. And I wasn't sure, and I'm not a Vedic scholar, and that's why I did give a call out to Vedic scholars in the audience, because I know y'all guys know better than I do. And so thank you for that. Thanks for being here and for sharing your knowledge. And so I had referred to it as possibly Nandi, because I knew Nandi was a Vedic cow, but Nandi is not. Nandi is the bull of Shiva. Shiva rides on a bull. And so it's not Nandi. It's another one called Kamadhenu. Kamadhenu. Kama means love. Kamadhenu. Very sweet. Also identified with Surabhi, who is a divine bovine goddess. But anyway, the reason I mentioned this is because our causal bodies are universal forms. We all share, and we all have access to this incredible wealth of subtle forms in the causal body that start just like the little child who maybe makes a decision. If the soul says, yes, in this lifetime, I'm going to be, somebody great. I'll be Alexander the Great or something like that. Then that person's life takes a certain shape, even when they're little. Well, it's the same, what we manifest on the surface, it takes a certain shape down at the deep down inside. And these regions of the causal body are malleable, they're accessible, they're highly responsive to our awareness. So as we shape them, or we favor certain shapes over others, we give rise to a foundation for whatever it is we're manifesting at the surface. That's why we were looking at this. So Kamadhenu was given a name in that particular system of religious thinking. In the West, we have other names, as I mentioned yesterday, that we give to those forms, like Mother Mary is a form, and the various saints, the various angels and archangels, and a lot of them have names, right? They'll have forms and names, and sometimes it's easier for people to identify with them and to locate them on the level of. Last night we talked about the moon. Did we talk about it? Yes, we talked about the moon, and how the moon also is one of those forms that we find within, is both within and without. Beautiful thing. So here, let's see, I mentioned that one. There was one more, but I'm not finding it right now, so I guess I'll come back to that. There was one more thing that I wanted to kind of clarify up from yesterday, but so be it. All right, so there's that idea of fulfillment, absolute fulfillment, coming to fully manifest fulfillment, and the significance of the gap that sits between the unmanifest para prakriti level, para meaning beyond and prakriti meaning nature, between that level and the causal level, where the very subtle beginnings of manifestation. So there's a really significant, obvious, clear gap between that and that, between unmanifest and manifest, subtle manifest. But then there's also like, so I was thinking this morning, God, it's so in our faces, you know, there's this gap between the ideas or the concepts or the wishes or hopes or dreams and desires, and then like the actual manifestation of those hopes and dreams and desires. And that's like such an obvious, clear gap. And this lady who asked this great question, where she drew the cool diagram, where she basically kind of drew that, you know, from the bottom to the top only. I'm just drawing it for you with words here. She noticed, yes, and I also was thinking about that there's a kind of a reflective or correlative relationship between this gap and that gap. We've kind of got two like really obvious gaps, right? That the one that sits between the unmanifest and the manifest, and the other that sits between the idea, concept, intention, and the actual manifestation. And they're like, in a way, they're looking at each other. And I think we did bring up yesterday that once something does manifest, the manifestation of that thing has a reflective effect back into the source of creation, where the original intention for its manifestation began. And that's when I realized this morning that the fulfillment here in the source of creation and the fulfillment here in the field of manifestation, it's really the same fulfillment. I'm sure of it. I'm sure it's like a necklace, you know, it's like a necklace that loops together like that. It's the same fulfillment. So what it means is this cycle that occurs from the unmanifest through the mounting waves of desire to the manifest. Actually, the whole thing occurs within the context of totality. It occurs within the context of wholeness. That it's never really outside of wholeness. And so what that means is that all these like mounting waves of desire that seem different, like this is where our thinking as a collective starts to shift. Like it's like a quantum shift, I realized, is that we have to think more like a physicist. Oh, thank you for the physicists in the audience. I bow down to the physicists. Because at the quantum level, one of the things that they've pointed out to me, bless their hearts, is that the relationship between form at the quantum level is not linear, right? So we think when we think of the diagram, and this is what I was thinking of it too, is that you've got fulfillment, and then something that looks like it kind of looks like this. Like an ascending or expanding spiral, you could say, of desire, right? Like that. And then boom, it comes out into the surface, it manifests, it's manifest. And that manifestation changes things. It creates form and expression in our world. And that creation in our world, it reflects back to the source of creation, like a self-referral loop is created there. And the source of creation goes, what did I make? And is it worth keeping? Or shall I destroy it? It's like so, or however the source of creation, which probably doesn't think like that, but anyway, but you get the idea, right? And then I realized that no, the desire segment of this process seems like it has a kind of an emptiness in it, because it's being experienced from the perspective of the manifest world within the context of how we define what is fulfillment, right? Like what is accomplishment? You know, you can say, well, the person who sits around in contemplation all day, what are they accomplishing? Not much. But the guy who gets out there and, you know, cuts down trees, I don't know, who does things is accomplishing so much. Is success. The businessman in the marketplace is accomplishing so much, or something like that. But what I realized is that the whole story of fulfillment must necessarily be present at every phase of the expression of desire, at the expansion of desire. So fullness or wholeness is actually in all the parts. Wholeness, totality is in all the parts. So the whole system, the whole cycle of fulfillment, desire, fulfillment is actually happening within the context, or within the field of totality itself. My husband brought up this point. Well, if fulfillment is in the absolute and fulfillment is in the relative, then is the fulfillment in the relative, or somebody else also, wait, is it illusion? Is it an illusory fulfillment, right? Like maybe it's not a real fulfillment. Let's see if I go down here to, I think there was a question that kind of referred to this. No, this person didn't ask it either. Who asked that question? Well, anyway, we have participants at many dimensions. We have multidimensional participation in these sessions. And there was this question that, unless I'm missing it somehow. No, I'm not finding it there either. Yeah, that if the etheric body is a level where there's not so much manifestation of form, that like what the fulfillment is more not the desire is more, and the tension between the desire and the fulfillment of the desire is more intense, you could say, like creates a tension, like you want something a little, but if you want something a lot, right, like this more tension, then it's all an illusion, because fulfillment is present in every point. Then at the physical level, it's really illusion, like the physical is really illusory. Did you ask that question? Did you ask that? No, God, I don't know who asked that question. Okay, sorry. No worries. Anyway. It is a necessary illusion. It is a necessary illusion. It is the illusion, if we think of it as illusion, it is the illusion that is our reality. And so for all practical purposes, this is valuable. The value of the expression of the fulfillment is significant. It's as much significant as the source of creation creating it. But it is all happening within the context of all source self-interacting with itself. I think that's the main point. Okay, boy, that was a long review of yesterday, but we did kind of get into a little bit into questions as well. Maybe the person who asked that question is, so would it be appropriate to think of the points of contact within a spiral as it's going from divine cosmic being further up through the levels of creation as clarity or mental cues? If thinking from the point of purest potential from a child, sorry if I didn't get the word best. I think there are different laws of nature that dominate at different levels of the manifesting process. And so the desire takes on different forms at different points along the process. And as we were just looking, we see that there's more tension, there's more intensity. The energy thickens because of the tension. Because of the tension, the energy becomes more intense as the desire rises to closer and closer to its expression or fulfillment. One lady saying, you picked up on my question energetically about the illusion within the context of fulfillment. Thank you. I'm so glad I was able to do that. Well, the illusion question was yours. Oh, I was looking at your husband. I'm sorry. They both sent in questions. Yes, that was further down, wasn't it? Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say. Right. So the lady who drew the cool diagram, which I cannot show you, also is a Sanskrit scholar. And she brought out a really incredibly beautiful point about, I'm not sure I finished answering that one question, though. We'll come back to it because it's important. But she asked this, she brought this incredible, beautiful point about the word rupa, because yesterday we were talking about nama and rupa, the relationship of these words, nama being name and rupa being form, and how basically what we're doing is we're playing in the field between nama and rupa, because nama is a intellectual construct. The language is an intellectual construct, essentially. And then there's the form of the language. And you can go back and listen to yesterday, the description breaking down the syllables and consonants of the word rupa. And her point is that u, and this is absolutely beautiful and so correct, that the u vowel is actually chandas, which is we think of Rishi, the knower, Devata, the process of knowing, and chandas, the known, that the known covers or obscures the absolute. So if we understand this process from fulfillment through desire to fulfillment as all happening within the field of absolute fulfillment, then it's not possible for the surface expression to cover the absolute source, because the whole thing is happening and experienced within the context of source. This has to do with the healing that we did for ego yesterday, so you might want to go back and check that too, or check ego on my knowledge base. But looking from the superficial level in, it looks like these waves of desire are kind of like empty. When you're in that place where you want something but you don't have it, there's that feeling of I don't have it. But that's from looking at it from the perspective of individuality. If we look at it from the level of universality, we see that the desire actually acts like a magnet that draws the resources, the laws of nature and the energy, all the different resources. It kind of organizes and brings them together to culminate in a package of potential that allows the desire to be fulfilled. And that's what the desire actually does. So looking from the ego from its more universal perspective, this is my hand position for universal ego, individual ego, universal ego, that universal ego then sees the waves of desire not as experiences of lacking or missing out or lack of fulfillment, but as the necessary structuring elements required to gather all the resources necessary to bring that particular vision into fulfillment, into expression, that particular wave of fulfillment into expression. All right. Oh, this is where she said it. This is it. If dreams are illusory, thank you, by the way, because then I could find it. If dreams are illusory, and we talked about the dreamscape as the etheric field, then the Maya or illusion of the physical world is even more precipitated illusion. Yes? So I thought about this, and I'm thinking, my thought about it's a really interesting question, and it really touches on an area that, as far as I know, hasn't been so explored, right? But my perception of it is that the physical experience of the waking state, dreaming state, sleeping state are three separate modes of the nervous system, and that the nervous system, maybe they're could be considered kind of equal to each other. If they're all understood within the context of wholeness or totality, then every part contains the whole. And so I'm just wondering, the importance of this question is really big for me, because the next webinar is also on dream and sleep state. And I would say that this is where we kind of interface with the 5 elements, because in the waking state of consciousness, we're actually interacting with the primal elements of creation, space, earth, or space, air, fire, water, and earth, if we go in that direction from subtle to gross. We're interacting with them in their most complete form, like in their most expressed form. Maybe not their most complete, but their most expressed form. Whereas in the dream state or in the deep sleep state, we're dealing with those elements in their subtler forms, and they have a reality, just like us. They have a reality that spans from the very first manifestations of creation all the way through to the physical material level of creation. So I guess the pivot in this sentence is the word illusory. And the question is the illusion of the subtle more or less illusory than the illusion of the manifest? And my thought is that at any point that we've broken from the illusion of separation, at any point that the illusion of separation is covering the absolute, is covering the source of creation, then it's illusion. That the illusion can be very great in the causal level as much as it could be very great in the material level. It can also be no illusion from the very subtle to the very material. So thank you. Thank you for making me think. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate getting to answer your question. Let's just make sure. She describes is the dynamism in both cases, the mutual repelling of the spinning electrons giving rise to the illusion of separation and the individuation of the physical realm. Well put. Thank you. Thank you for knowing Sanskrit better than I, and for helping to bring in that like little extra piece. Because I described the r and the p and the but you described the oo, and now we have the whole word. Oh, so I'll have to make a video for that for YouTube, huh? All right, lots more questions coming in. Regarding illusion, is there a time lag between the finer non-physical and the physical manifestation? I've also heard of the brain working 5 minutes ahead, predictive reality. All of these delays illusory until fulfilled, made real. Okay, so thank you. That's another thing that came up when I had this vision this morning of the whole thing being contained within wholeness, is that the lag is definitely partly due to the nature of the human nervous system, because our nervous system breaks reality into this linear sequential unfoldment of moments and experience. So from the perspective of wholeness, there's no time lag at all. That the fulfillment is there, the fulfillment, even the gathering of the resources part of the process is enriching and fulfilling. It's like the little child, they're gathering their resources, the resources of knowledge and life experience and so forth. So there's also another matter here, which is how do we manifest in the context of our relationship with time? Because time as a linear sequential unfoldment is also part of the illusory nature of the relative. And as such, we have access to the Lord of time, or the God of time, or the causal region, which is responsible for time. And we can use our awareness to interact with that region in order to speed up time or slow down time, to support the manifestation of something in perfect time as it interfaces with the rest of reality. There's definitely a principle that when an idea or an inspiration comes up, usually there are a lot of resources available with it at that same time. And so it's good to jump on an idea when it first comes up. If we kind of put it on the back burner and make it wait, then there's more of a chance for all the kind of momentum behind it to disperse. So there is that. But also, from my perspective, it's important to be comfortable, and it's also important to be prudent. And so it doesn't hurt when a desire comes up to work with it a little bit. There are a lot more questions, but I have this one more thing that I really wanted to bring out, because again, this is brand new information that just came this morning and I really wanted to share with you. And that is that on a previous webinar, I talked about an etheric body massage. And because the etheric body radiates outside the physical body just by a few inches, and we practiced yesterday feeling our etheric bodies like that. So there's a famous, well-known, I don't know how well-known, but a known etheric body massage called Kolemini. And it was supposedly, received through divine means. And I took a course in it, and it's definitely a real thing. I mean, you can definitely massage your etheric body. There's no question about it. And it definitely helps with pain. and he supports healing. And the massage movements are very much in line with the movements that are used for Ayurvedic massage, which is long on the long bones and round on the joints, and then long on the long bones like that. So simple, round like that on the shoulders and so forth. So that's known. That's a known thing. But this morning, I was actually using it. I was doing a combination of energy healing and some working with the etheric body, which is where the body holds pain, right? Yes, I have pain sometimes too, but I use energy healing to get rid of it. So, so yay. Anyway, so I was doing this, and what I realized was, with awareness, if we do the movements like in a very kind of large, sort of crude, like almost as if you were massaging the body physically, that the interface between awareness and the etheric body is more gross. And I realized that if I let the area, like say it was my wrist, it wasn't, but it would just say it was my wrist. If I'm there, and instead of doing a big movement like this, I slowed down, I stopped the actual hand movement, and I let the awareness go in to its finest, most delicate level. And I move the energy just with consciousness alone, not with moving the actual limbs, just moving with consciousness alone. It became finer and finer, more and more powerful, and was able to bring that movement all the way back to the source of creation, thus eliminating pain entirely. Anybody who has joint pain or UTI or, other kinds of, uncomfortable pains, there it is. There it is. And so it's like a kind of, it's like kolemini, I think is pronounced, but it's very, very subtle. It takes it down to the subtle level where it's just consciousness, and just the consciousness is moving it. And it's just such a tender, delicate, tiny, tiny little movement, just like a movement of just the finest intention. And it was very powerful. It's a very, very powerful process. And so I would like to offer that to everyone, because y'all beautiful people can do this. You're good at this. This is something we all can do. We all can do. All right. So this time, okay, maybe the fulfillment really comes from contact, with the deepest levels of unmanifest level. Right. Yes, this is what we were talking about before. Yes, it's all really the fulfillment, even its expression at the surface, is really all within the context of that source of creation. Maybe people get confused when they're expecting fulfillment from the most manifest level. No, I don't think so. The reason people think getting wealth or power does not bring real happiness, well, it's true that wealth and power doesn't bring the happiness. Sometimes people associate, they think, well, if I had this, I would be happier, if I had that. But I think we structure the fulfillment as we go through the process, as we experience the process of the fulfillment coming from the source and up to the surface. And maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, but this is another like really brilliant point that came from Maharishi back in the 1950s, is that for a long time, just maybe not for the lady even who asked this question, she may be clear on it, but for anybody else who isn't clear on this point, that for ages, spiritual evolution was associated with asceticism, even deprivation, even martyrdom, right? Like Christ was martyred and saints were martyred. So the fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment, the absolute, was associated with terrible loss on the material level of creation, on the material level of self. And so this is not true. This is false. This is false, that actually fullness of the absolute and fullness of the relative go hand in hand. And the point here is that when we're thinking, well, all right, like the reason that idea came up of, well, if you really want to be enlightened, you just throw away your clothes and just wear a loincloth and go sit in a cave in the Himalayas with, nothing but your little, gourd cup for water and, hope someone brings you some food sometimes, like this is how you get enlightened. that vision was built on the premise that, well, I had desires and I tried to get fulfilled, but they didn't get fulfilled. So maybe the thing to do is just don't have desires. And that premise went hand in hand with the idea of the ego is no good and that we shouldn't have an ego at all and, kill desires and kill the ego. And both of these ideas have proved wrong. Just saying that the principle is not to kill the ego, but to evolve the ego. So you have individual ego, and universal ego, the entire spectrum of ego, and the flexibility to place your point of perception anywhere along that spectrum you need to, depending on the needs of the moment. And with desires, same thing, that having the desire and feeling, the desire is not yet fulfilled, or maybe it will never be fulfilled, is part of that process is knowing, number one, that because the desire is there as yet unfulfilled, means that you are in the flow of fulfillment expressing itself. And that the desire period that you're in, that point that you're in, is the point where your focus is on appreciating and understanding and recognizing the gathering of resources. And that when we put our attention, and that's what energy healing is about, right? We put our attention on, I have this desire that hasn't been realized yet. Then when we use the attention at that point to activate the levels of subtle consciousness, causal body, that are useful for enhancing, like bringing the laws of nature to light or alive, activating the laws of nature behind that desire to support it, then we have a formula for moving through the period of desire with grace, without self-sabotaging or blocking that flow. Great question. The points of contact in the spiral of cosmic being, coming to total divine expression in the physical form, PHORM. The traumas in life being the physical symptoms of the illusion. No, anything can be an illusion. Yes, physical traumas, because anything that overwhelms the system can cover the absolute. So even something super blissful. And maybe we could say, well, I won the lottery back in 1987, and that was kind of traumatic. So we could say maybe something that's pleasant or that we would identify as good or something could also be traumatic. But the important thing is to what degree it overwhelms the nervous system, that the nervous system then loses that aspect of its functioning that allows it to remain connected to the source of creation. I hope that makes sense. But so we could say traumas, but anything that overwhelms the nervous system, right? Then those are the things, those are the symptoms that of illusion, of the source of being. Anything else but absolute fulfillment, right? Thank you for your assistance with the wording. Yes, of course. You had mentioned having a vision last night. Look forward to hearing. Yes, that's come out already. Pure person might wish peace on earth, a dedicated whole life for that. But without pure collective, it cannot be possible, right? Ooh, so this very wonderful and brilliant woman is pointing out, thank you for your question. She's pointing out that individual desires and collective desires need to line up. Here's the thing. Like the last question that talks about how, some overwhelming trauma or something in the system can sort of overwhelm our connection to the absolute. And that can happen at a collective level as well. And so the thing is that if we start from the premise that the whole thing that's happening is happening within the context of totality or wholeness, that it's really divine being interacting with ourselves, and there really isn't anything else other than that, except we're all the parts of divine being, but it's really one wholeness with many parts. Then we could say, well, if some of the parts are overwhelmed and they're not able to integrate this experience, they can have the effect of, there can be a little bit of slowing down of that incredible, like unquenchable, unstoppable flow of creative intelligence from the source of creation coming forward and manifesting, because the universe is going to evolve with or without us, basically. So maybe some people in the collective are like, oh yeah, I'm on board with that. I want to evolve. So the universe is evolving. Get me in the middle of that river, because I want all that flow of universal intelligence behind my evolution and with me, like that. And then maybe some people are like, oh, I want to experiment with destroying myself, or, or some kind of destructive forms, or I don't care about evolution. I don't want to evolve, something like that. Those individuals cannot ever completely go out of the evolution of the universe. The universe evolution is going to happen anyway. That's just the way it is. So sooner or later, they can think, no, I'm going to hunker down over here and I'm not going to evolve, but sooner or later, at some point or another, the whoosh of creation is just going to go, no, come on, you're on. Like that just happens. So I think if a pure person wishes for peace on earth and dedicated for the life of everyone in creation and everyone on earth, that desire will have more supportive nature behind it, because it's an evolutionary desire. And there could be perhaps some little slowing down or some lag or some little blockages here or there. But in the end, that desire will come forward. And especially, if you get a certain percentage of the people, right? Like the big rock in the room and everybody's 100 people pushing all different directions, but 10 start to push in the same direction, then it moves in that direction because they organize themselves, which is exactly what we're doing. So, so thank you for that question. Thank you to Croatia, beautiful Croatia. Just to be clear, so the term illusion is what separation is, and vice versa. Separation is illusion. I think they're a little different. Illusion clouds or camouflages the absolute. Illusion is that which is like non-truth, you could say. Separation is what happens in this divine process that occurs at every point in creation, where the absolute sort of it emerges as an expression in the manifest field of creation, and ideally comes all the way up to full physical expression, and then it returns. And that process does not have to be clouded by illusion. That process does not have to be experienced as outside of totality or wholeness. That the human nervous system has the potential to become flexible enough that the experience of totality is held or gained or owned at every point within the context of that divine dialogue. Good question. Thanks for Kolemini. Thank you for Kolemini massage and the consciousness and all the way the seed. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Oh, yes, good. She's going to heal her broken bone. Yes. And as you do that, no, anybody else who has a broken bone or might have or could have something that needs to be repaired there, the intelligence of the body is designed to heal bones. This is amazing because bones are hard, right? So the fact that the intelligence of the body can do that is really fantastic. It can build something as hard as bone tissue. And that includes people who have teeth issues, right? Bone or jaw or the teeth around here, it's very hard material, but there is specific intelligence in your body that's designed for healing hard material. And part of the story is going in there. And the other part of the story is letting your heart feel like a deepest reverent love for that quality of intelligence which is already possessed by you. it's found these intelligences, these laws of nature, these forms that are responsible for healing at the physical level, they have their home, they reside at that very finest material level, causal level, and there's like a place, there's a region, there's a section of your causal body that's just for that particular intelligence that heals bone tissue, or people with teeth stuff that heals enamel. So awareness going deep, 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 deep. And it's just very simple. And all it is it's just a feeling in the heart of I love you, I love you, I love you, basically. Because the I love you, it's like a catalyst. It activates the healing process. I hope that helps. Thanks for the awesome question. Yeah, we want that bone to heal really quick. I've pushed desires away by being too attached and trying to force them, right? Instead, do I try to let them go? Or do I just focus on getting my desire? Okay, that's such a good question. So my response to this, is a vision board a good thing to have? Yeah, I think vision boards are cool. I've heard people have incredible experiences with vision boards. But my perception here is that the desire, if it's like a really big desire, somehow requires the gathering of a lot of resources. And so it's not happening like suddenly. That the principle here is to fill the cup full. We fill the cup full. We become within ourselves fullness. You become full within yourself. And part of that story is to recognize that this process of from fulfillment through the waves of desire to fulfillment is happening within the field of your own eternal being, your own eternal being. Because when the process is seen within that context, kind of like from the universal ego perspective, then the process is not understood as like a process of lack, if that makes sense, but it's a process of fullness, becoming fuller and fuller and fuller. And from that perspective, then all kinds of desires come forward. Like, because we have ideas and intentions and desires, but there are a lot of desires that are part of our journey to completeness, we could say, which we don't even know about yet. Like, I didn't think I was going to do this. When I was a little girl, the message came, oh, Dorothy, you should do this. I'm like, no way. And then I don't want to help heal people. Oh, that just sounds terrible. So that was me at like 10, right? And then, as it came on, and then when it came on in full value and I was quite sick and I had to heal myself, I was like, well, okay, but like, I don't want anybody to know I do this. And keep it a big secret from like I was really resisting it, but it was part of this journey that at some point I just gave up and went, that's just going to happen. So it's okay. And so then other desires will come like that too. And what you'll find is that the desires, like they dovetail within each other. So maybe you have a desire that's very clear in your mind that you want over here, but then there's another desire you don't even know about yet. And that as it comes into manifestation, you realize, oh, I needed this desire to be fulfilled so I could also fulfill that desire. And that's part of the gathering of resources, part of the process, right? So I think that's why it's good to be kind of like open and realize that what we're really focusing on is we're developing ourselves holistically. And that as we do that, then all the parts will evolve together and fit together so that when the desire, that your first initial desire becomes fully manifested, that it will come with all the support around it so that it will be stable, right? So that you hang on to it. So people are so worried now. Could we do a healing? Oh, yes, please, for more lightness of being, more smiles, laughter, simple appreciation of the moment. Thank you for that question. Thank you. You're so sweet. We have hardly done any healings in this session, and we're already coming up to this time. So thank you for this question. Also, I want you to know the very sweet people who asked this question, the healing at the end of yesterday's webinar was also with you in mind, because that healing for America, because, the whole world feels like it's been through a trauma, right? Speaking of feeling overwhelmed, we look at numbers and I don't even know what the COVID numbers in America are right now, but the last I heard, we breached 300,000 deaths, which is a lot of people. It's a lot of people to lose. And my dear husband reads the news and told me about some of the outcomes of the uprising at the Capitol just a couple days ago. And just as a desire, as it's moving toward the surface, our collective is experiencing that as signposts that things are not well. Things are not well in the collective. But we can also look at it. We can just make a shift. And so here what we're doing is we're just gathering our collective. We're just gathering our resources in our group, our big group. We have a big group now. And as we gather our resources, we're just going to offer this like a download to the collective consciousness, just this little shift that when we notice things that seem wrong, like we look to the government or to the way the system is running or something, we say, oh, it's not right, it's bad, it's not good enough or something. And when we see that for the collective, when the look is there, or they're just looking at their own monthly finances and like, I lost my business and I lost my job and I can't pay my rent, like what the heck am I going to do? That's the symptom on the surface. And all we're doing as a group is we're just shining the light. We're shining the light on the whole system. So what we're doing is we're shining the light. It's easy for people to see the symptom on the surface, but now we're shining the light on the whole spectrum, all the way down to the source of creation. So the whole spectrum lights up. Yes, the symptom is on the surface, but there's this whole spectrum of self here. There's the whole spectrum of self. And within the spectrum of self, the desire is actually mounting waves of fulfillment. And the desire carries within it all the resources to carry it to fullest expression. And this is like a kind of a re-education. It's a download coming in for the collective, and it comes in through the crown of the head. So first, when it comes in like in such a visceral form. It's just a feeling. It's just like, oh, it just feels different. Like the energy patterning in my environment through the web of life, it feels different. Feels different. Receptivity to this download. Supporting receptivity. Again, I'm seeing that cow. What is it? The Kamadeu? Did I say it right? Kamadeu? I'm seeing Kamadeu. Kamadenu. I'm seeing Kamadenu again. I'm seeing. And by the way, I didn't read you the whole story, but when Kamadenu was ordered by the creator to give milk, Kamadenu didn't just give milk. Kamadenu gave and gave and gave and gave like that. So that's why it was seen like that. Beautiful quality of being. It's like a huge thing. And this was born, this clear awareness of this particular aspect of our causal bodies, this Kamadenu aspect of our causal bodies, was born of this webinar. Like I didn't think before this webinar, oh, I'll be sure to talk about that. Because if I had, I would have looked up the name anyway, right? So it just came. And again, it comes in this healing. That with the download of the symptom on the surface is a symptom, it looks like lacking, like some lack on the surface from a surface perspective. But there's all this spectrum. And within the spectrum, there's all this dynamic expression of fulfillment. Goes both directions. The collapse of the dialogue and the coming forth of the dialogue. And within that, I feel as if this causal form is sitting in the middle of it all. It's just sitting. It feels as if the causal form of Kamadenu is sitting in the middle of our healing circle. and it's just being offered, being adored. And whenever that happens, whenever we have some like specified aspect of the causal field, which is receiving the maximum attention and is kind of like in the center of focus always, you guys, always back to being also. It has to be, because that aspect of creation can only really be fulfilled through the infinite access to the infinite resource of being. So beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's like we're making a bed of pure divine grace and being for Kamadhenu to reside. And recognized and adored, so adored. And I'm just feeling this waves where it's activating. And the thing about always when you have a specific feature of the causal body, which is being supported or activated at any moment, using that moment to go, oh yeah, to self-refer back into wholeness, it goes along with the non-attachment question, right? Because it comes from a saying that a friend of mine recently, a sweet young lady who's was raised in a Vedic family, said that there's a kind of like a saying in the Vedas that if you worship the gods, then you get the gods. But if you worship Krishna, which is considered like the highest form, then you get that. So in a sense, we could say energy healing. I mean, if you wanted to look at it from a religious, but I don't want to look at it from a religious, but you could kind of look at it that way too, that, you know, we're putting the attention there on Kamadhenu because Kamadhenu has the qualities which our world needs right now. That's the quality that needs, so it's activating. But the activation is coming from a place of witnessing, of like non-attachment, essentially. Wholeness. And that's all for the purpose of folding back into the source of creation, which is why the creation does this cycle from fulfillment through desire to fulfillment. It does that in order to nourish itself. So that's the completion. It's like the flop of the wave. It's like the other side of the necklace. It's the other piece of the clasp. Bring it together. It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. And that's going out, that's washing out over the field of the collective for everybody. And just like yesterday's session, I feel that it's so beautiful that with this download also comes a kind of honoring of pure truth. Those laws of nature associated with pure truth also are so important. Dharma, because Dharma is the tool that is required for all people's thinking and action, for conscience, for the conscience to get in line with cosmic intention. All right. Become the arrow that draws the target. Ooh, that's so beautiful. The target that draws the arrow. Yes, become the target that draws the arrow. Exactly. Oh, well put. Thank you for being with me. I was thinking about you a lot the other day. Sounds like you surrendered to fullness. Oh, well, maybe. Hopefully we all. Is there any way to access the healings from yesterday? Absolutely. Thank you also for being with me. I've been planning to look and see if you've replied to my email because I love you and I love your music. Okay. Yeah, so everybody gets recordings from both sessions. Are there desires established before birth? And those, oh, and this gets into some really gorgeous questions also that came up on these papers as well. And of course, we're running out of time, but this, maybe we can combine a few questions here. Are there desires established before birth and those we consciously develop? And are they different? And what are the unconscious desires? And are they affected by changes in the collective? Okay. That's a really deep question. Thank you. And it kind of sort of goes along with this one. Is there a change in the quality and functioning of the etheric body as we age from infancy to old age? Right? Because there's sort of a relationship there between birth and now. So yes, we definitely, the soul has a kind of overview position in the spirit world. And so a lot of the major turns and changes of the life are set up in the spirit world before we come here. Now, if the individual is living a life where they're not so aware of the subtle mechanics and structuring of what's going on inside of them, generally the general pattern will be to just follow that like a roadmap. They just follow from birth to death. They just follow that roadmap. Whereas once awareness starts to evolve and the inner wakefulness starts to occur, then all of a sudden we see, oh, looks like I made the decision to have this very difficult challenge in my life because I needed to learn a particular lesson. And oh, I seem to have learned it early. So maybe I don't need to have that challenge anymore. And, at that point, that's just an example. But absolutely, at any point, we have the ability to change that roadmap. At any point, you have the ability, at any point. Sometimes people do that when they fall in love. They're kind of going along one track, and then they meet somebody, and that person's on this track over here, and somehow they have to kind of coordinate a little bit. It changes their track just a little bit. What are the unconscious desires that, and are they affected by changes in the collective? Yeah, and I would say, the collective also can do that. Like events can occur that are, but I think that people choose to be born at certain times in creation. And we also, a lot of times, are waiting and watching for cues. So it's not so much the person thinks, when I turn 22 years old, 5 months and 13 days, I will do this. It's not usually so much like that. It's more like, well, like for me, one of my cues was when my father died. When my father died, and I didn't know, he didn't know exactly when he was going to die, and I didn't know exactly but when he died, that kind of sent my life into a shift occurred at that point. So it's more like that. It's like certain cues, you wait for something, and sometimes they're even like cues from the environment. A beautiful friend of mine was saying that, someone would see an arrow. She would see an arrow, or somehow an arrow or an archer would show up at some point, and that would be the cue that something very important was going to happen in her life. And so, it was beautiful, and it all made sense. I know that sounds kind of almost like a superstition thing, but it wasn't. It was very calculated, what my friend said. But anyway, yeah. So, unconscious desires affected by changes in the collective. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I only had an hour today. We'll watch replay and get the rest. Yeah, beautiful. Crying tears of gratitude. Oh, Kama Denu. Oh, thank you. Yeah, not quite spelled right, but Kama Denu. Sounds a little bit like Denu, the Hebrew word indicating enough or sufficiency. They could very well have the same root. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Are you saying Denu? Kama Denu? Yes, for the person who asked this. I think Denu may be related to the word for give. Also, people who went to the caves to work on getting enlightened may have had the intention to meditate there and purify their minds. Yeah, of course. And thanks for talking about her previous question, of course. Or a dream. Tears of gratitude. Oh, you're so sweet. So changes in the etheric body as people age, and is a very important question because this has to do with how do we form ourselves? How do we form ourselves? The form of the physical body rests or rides on the shapes and forms in the etheric body. So the etheric body, and I think I touched on this somewhat yesterday, of how the etheric body, it's kind of like a filter, and it also holds memories, and it holds some memories. Like the mental body is involved in the process of remembering, but the physical body and the etheric body they hold feelings, they hold memories, impressions, right? So what happens is an unresolved experience, like a traumatic experience where the underlying constructs of that experience didn't get completely processed, can sit in the etheric body. And when they do that, if we don't deal with them or handle them over time, more of the same can get stuck, and eventually something like that can come to the point where it manifests as an imbalance in the physiology. And the etheric body is more malleable, obviously, than the physical body because it's made of lighter versions of the 5 elements. At one point in a previous webinar, I said, oh, it's just made of air and space. But I really dove into that particular point for this webinar because I really wanted to be sure, be very, very sure what I was saying. And I've come to the determination that the elements have a spectrum of density. So all the elements can be found in the etheric body, in the mental body, in the emotional body, astral, causal. But there's a kind of a physicality to the etheric body. So it really shares on the level of space and air very much. It's like almost at that level, there's an overlap, you could say. There's a kind of overlap between the etheric body and the physical bodies. And like that kind of makes sense, right? Because we're really dealing with a spectrum, and we're dealing with a spectrum that has different laws of nature dominating at different points along the spectrum. So it kind of makes sense that, where do you slice it exactly? It's like slightly different spots, but, there's definitely that element of actual space and air. She says, here's a question about dreams. I think I'm going to defer this question. It's a great question. Thank you. But I think I'd like to defer it to the next webinar, which is literally all about dreams and sleep, because that's going to be fun. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you. All right. I think it's time. We've reached our time. I didn't get to all the questions. There's just one more quick question I think I'll cover, and then we'll go. And that is, what is the relation between the etheric body and the body elemental? The body elemental is a causal form that resides in the causal, and it doesn't come up as manifest as the etheric level. So it's an easy, that was a low-hanging fruit there, easy to answer. Whereas the etheric body is more, you could almost say, this is an interesting question, you could almost say the body elemental and the etheric body are kind of reflecting each other, just like the gap between the absolute and the finest relative, and the gap between the mental and physical are kind of reflecting each other. There's a kind of a correlation. There's a correlative relationship between them, because the body elemental will be working with the etheric body. There'll be like a self-referral loop that's going around. But I think of the body elemental as being that devata. It's like a devata that oversees all the bodies. Devata is like the king of the devas of the body, so to say. So it maintains its existence at that causal level, whereas the body elemental is very close to physical level. All right. Excellent. Amazing questions today, guys. Amazing. Thank you all for being with me. Sorry, I went a little bit over time, but oh yeah. Yeah, I just love you guys, and I'm so glad we got to hang out together, and I'm so glad we got to cover these points, and so much new knowledge came out. We didn't do as many healings today as I was expecting, but maybe the next webinar will be chock full of healings, something like that. And all of you who are with me for the package from Darius and for the Total Access package and the webinar packages, you'll get all the healings in between in the remote sessions, which I'm sending out 3 times a week. So lots of healings chock full there. Yeah, so looking forward to seeing you all again. Thank you. Bye.